everyone, I'm Kevin, otherwise known as 4 and BX257, here to bring you another 1980s and 90s G.I. Joe tour review. And today I'm going to be taking a look at Cobra's high-speed attack hovercraft, the 1992 RAT. Now, the RAT makes its first comic book appearance in the Old Mobile comic run of G.I. Joe in issue number 127, and makes its first cartoon appearance in the de-animated first season episode titled Long Live Rock and Roll Part 1. The Cobra RAT was priced as a small vehicle, even though physically it wasn't. It was around 9 inches long. Some of that length was actually added to it by these jet engines poking out the back, and speaking of that, that adds to the height of the vehicle at around 5 inches tall. So this was actually a substantial vehicle for your $5 back in 1992. And now, onto its features. The Cobra RAT has an opening canopy, which seats one figure inside. And there is actually a lot of detail in there. I'm hoping the camera can capture this. But there's a highly detailed console for the driver. And the driver even has some molded-in seat belts, which is kind of odd because, well, the seat belts don't move. So your action figure would be sitting on top of those seat belts. But oh well, at least it's better than those 1988/1989 physical seat belts, which were impossible to get onto the figures and sometimes impossible to take off. Either side of the cockpit, we have these twin machine guns, which even though they're on a funny angle, they actually do swivel out and do look not that bad, even when they're on that funny angle there. In both front corners, we have what the blueprints list as slicer blades with underbrush defoliation barbs. Well, they actually call them gyrating slicer blades, but I think rotating is the word that they meant to go for here. And that's exactly what they do. They rotate, but they actually rotate automatically because they're actually hooked up to the wheels underneath, so that when you roll this thing forward, they're supposed to spin. And I say supposed to because I think the mechanism on mine is slightly warped because mine keeps hitting the actual underbody here before it actually hits the slicing blades here. But it's the thought that counts. And while this may seem a little bit of a weird thing, it makes sense for this being a hovercraft and not really that high up off the ground, so you would need something to actually slice up the large grass, maybe small rocks, tree branches or whatnot that this thing might encounter. And of course you can see that this thing does have wheels and it's really inset away from the outer edge, so you don't immediately see the wheels. This thing does give off a sort of a hovering vibe, even though it rolls quite freely. And now to talk about the main gimmick of the Cobra RAT, and that's these anti-aircraft flak rotors. As you can see, this side almost looks the same as the other side, but actually it isn't. This side has a trigger, and as such, a launching mechanism, and this side is just a dummy. It's really strange that they didn't spring for, pun intended, a second launcher on this side. So Hasbro just calls this version the storage area for the flak rotor. And as for the flak rotor itself, as you can see, it is just a plain propeller. It doesn't look like any type of weapon at all. I mean, granted, if this thing fell on your head, you'd be in pretty bad shape, but it doesn't look like anything which would launch up into the air and take care of jet planes or anything. You will notice, however, that it does have that really unique zigzag notch on there, and it fits rather securely onto the nub on the storage side, and it fits rather loosely onto the other side. You also notice that we have a gigantic Cobra symbol molded onto here, and that's because starting in 1991 all the vehicles had faction symbols molded onto them, whether it was the G.I. Joe logo or the Cobra logo, and this is where they decided to put the Cobra logo. with the Flak Rotor right on top of it. As for the Flak Rotor launcher itself, and you can see that this thing is its trigger, because it says so on a sticker rather boldly. What you do is you turn this thing clockwise around 3 times. I'm sure if you had pliers you could do it with just the nub, but it's a lot easier to do it with the Flak Rotor installed. And then what's very interesting is that while the trigger has this detail on the top, almost as if you're supposed to push it down, because, well, that's generally why you would put detail, like grip detail, on the top of something. You don't. You actually have to push it in. So you push it in, and off it goes. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with this Flak Rotor mechanism because while it works flawlessly, I just don't like how fast this thing is and how random the direction winds up being once it launches up. It's really hard for me to say something negative about the Cobra RAT because while a lot of people really don't like this particular toy, I can see that it has a lot of really good features and would have been a very quality, very memorable toy for a lot of children of the 90s if only this thing had the quality to match the toys that were not only released before this toy was, but also during the time that this toy was. This is an unusually cheaply made toy for some strange reason. Now, the red plastic here is particularly odd because, well, it's a little hard to see because, well, red of this vibrancy generally washes out a lot of detail, but it is almost see-through, which is very strange. And I kind of wish they had used that area to put a foot peg on here, because this thing, like I said, despite being a $5 toy and should have been like half its size, it really is big enough to have had at least a little personnel platform to carry more figures on here. But this is one of the, I guess, the trendsetters for this single unit body sort of molding that they started going off forward with 1992 and 93, a little bit of 94 as well, unfortunately. And it does look rather cheap because, as you can see, my hand is going right through the bottom of the seat there. Even the console is sort of molded out in like off an empty space here. And of course there is obviously no detail on the bottom because, well, there just isn't any. You can even see the mechanism here, just on that one side, and this thing is just blank on the other. It's really hard to see, so I'll cut in with a photograph, but you'll see that this thing has a copyright of 1990. Now, normally a toy is designed 1 year beforehand, and will often have a year prior to its release, but not usually 2 years prior to its release. So I'm really curious as to why this thing was delayed for so long, and what it could possibly have added to the design. Perhaps originally it came with 2 different launchers, and they determined that one extra launcher would put it out of the $5 price bracket. Perhaps it was a different color, which they didn't really approve of. Maybe it had a bottom on here. Who knows? Very curiously, for the box art, they actually use the 1992 Firefly as a pilot for this thing. And I can kind of understand why, because Firefly had that neon green color, which goes along with the stickers. However, who you're supposed to use is the 1992 Cobra Eels, released that year. And while it makes sense that he would be piloting an aquatic craft, it actually goes on to land as well as a hovercraft. But the fact of the matter is that, well, he is kind of a strange color combination for the red and black and pops of green. And now to compare the Cobra RAT with what came before, that is the 1990 Cobra Piranha. And you can actually see that there are some similarities, such as the guns right beside the single seat canopy, which they both share, as well as a big jet engine on the back. Again, they both share this. But I can honestly say that while the Piranha doesn't have the same level of gimmicky features, the fact of the matter is that the plastic quality is so much better. The maroon, well, I know a lot of people really don't like maroon for aquatic vehicles, but it is something of a staple in the Cobra Navy. But the fact of the matter is that I think this is the same color which they should have used for the Rat. I think that would have brought out a lot of the detail, which is really hard to see with such a bright red. Now, in the same year that the Cobra RAT came out, the G.I. Joes also had an aquatic vehicle in the G.I. Joe Barracuda, although I'm not really sure that this is a fair matchup, that being a hovercraft and this being a submarine. Yeah, they're both aquatic vehicles, but they both fill very different niches. But again, something released in the same year shouldn't have vastly different qualities of plastic and workmanship. While that thing is a unibody, like kind of a stamping, this thing has a body, a chassis, a completely closed cockpit. It had the ability to rise and lower in the water. Now granted, this was like $1 or $2 more than the Cobra RAT, but still, this thing is vastly more quality than the RAT is. Now I know I've become rather famous for doing this, dunking my toys into water, but while this thing is a aquatic hovercraft and it is shown in the water in both the comic books and the cartoons, the fact of the matter is that I will not be dunking this in the water. I really don't believe this thing could float. It is extremely hollow with tons of holes all over this thing. It is kind of back heavy, so it's not even balanced. And the fact of the matter is that this thing comes with paper stickers. So this thing is, I mean, they're relatively well put on by whoever put this thing on back in 1992. So I'm not about to destroy their work. The funny thing is that in the same year, we have the 1992 Barracuda once again, and this thing is meant to go into the water, and it has vinyl stickers like a proper G.I. Joe toy. So this thing actually can withstand some water use, whereas this thing cannot. So if you consider the RAT just a surface aquatic vehicle, forgetting the hovercraft portion of it, I think the closest thing that actually comes to it is the figure included inflated boat from the 1991 Tracker figure. However, if you consider it purely as a hovercraft, you have to go all the way back to 1990 to see a G.I. Joe equivalent, with a re-release of the Havoc's mini hovercraft sled, here in the Sky Patrol Chrome. If you're looking for a Cobra RAT on the aftermarket, they are incredibly cheap and plentiful, and you really shouldn't have a hard time finding one loose, complete with all of its parts for a very, very reasonable price. However, there are one thing that you do have to look out for, and that is whether or not you have both of your Flak Rotors. Now I know that this thing launches only one rotor at a time, but unlike missile launching vehicles and figures, you really do need two in order for this thing to look complete, because it does store on either side of the Flak Rotor launchers, and it kind of needs to be symmetrical in that way. However, if you are looking for one and you're missing one or two parts, there are a few things you do have to just sort of keep in mind. And that is the front and rear rollers are not the same. This one having the little fins, which in turn rotate these little slicers. So those aren't the same. Even the guns are not the same. There is a left and a right, just as there is a left and a right to the front slicers themselves. As a matter of fact, they are marked with an R and an L. So you do need one because they are molded in opposite directions. Even though they didn't have to be, they are. Honestly, if this thing were a little bit better quality, this thing would be a great addition to most people's Cobra navies. As such, it is sort of halfway deserving of the bad reputation it does have within the collector community. Personally, I think it looks kind of okay, especially when you have all the other brightly colored 1990 Cobra figures manning it, But then again, some people don't even like that, so it's really up to you as to whether you want to add this cheap little guy to your collection. So this thing launching upwards at, well, quite a large... However, there are a few other things that you really should be... Well, that's all the time I have right now. Please check out my Facebook page for more information and behind-the-scenes photos for these reviews. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for next time to see another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review. See you then.